When you start to question the whole thing, it unwinds. Behold the great deception, traversing throughout time. Do you dare to question if there's a grip upon your mind? Cause at the mere suggestion it leaves you all entwined. I've been searching round for curvature, but there ain't none to see. No matter where I let my head turn, seems awfully flat to me. Will you start to question the shackles of your mind? If you let it open, you know there's truth inside. Have you been numbed into complacence, bred in circus to the end? It's time to claim your mental freedom. You know it's up to you, my friend. I've been searching round for curvature, but there ain't none to see. No matter where I let my head turn, seems awfully flat to me. The shackles of your mind. If you let it open, you know there's truth inside. Will you start to question the shackles of your mind? If you let it open, you know there's truth inside.
I love conspiracy theories, or do I? Thanks for that support there, studio audience. All right, conspiracies are good. They add spice to life. It's more fun to think of mind-controlled devices in the grocery to steer us towards the Doritos instead of just realizing that you're just drunk and hungry. But conspiracy theories are associated with crazy people because they make up stuff and then they believe it's true. Perhaps we could say the same about religion. Oh. Remember, this is only a discussion program. It's a harmless piece of television fluff, and in no way a threat to what you believe. There's a conspiracy. You know that one about, oh, they're putting stuff in the contrails in airliners, like the jets in the sky, and they're putting stuff in it to control our minds? Do you think the airlines are capable of that? Have you ever tried to change a ticket at an airport? Do you think these people are capable of putting mind-controlled drugs into the plane? They can hardly get you onto the plane. I don't think so.
So, Texas, are we going to say that this thing rising 37 feet in just a matter of minutes is normal? Are we going to say that back in 1936 or 1932, whatever it was, it raised up 36 feet after 36 inches of rain in less than 36 hours, and this time we have 12 inches of rain, right? You say, oh, well, it was different where it was. Fine. But we got a 40-foot wall of surge. Take a look. Look at the width of that river. Look at the width over there, how far that is. You see, we're all supposed to believe that with a third of the amount of rain, all of a sudden, we've got this water surge of 40 feet, right? The worst in 100 years. And this all came and nobody knew, nobody predicted it. The weather, nobody knew about this, right?
My own meteorologist to fine-tune that weather statement, and as many of you know, and many of you in broadcast journalism and meteorology, you can go back and look at your own forecast, and the amount of rain that fell in this specific location was never in any of those forecasts.
So you hear him right there. The amount of rain that fell was never in any of those forecasts. So how could the greatest flood in 100 years not have been predicted? Right? How could they not have known? Oh, well, it's the Texas Hill Country, it's flash floods, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't matter. We got a wall of 40 feet of water and we had no idea. Well, look at that. Map of rain enhancement projects in Texas. Right there in the Hill Country where it happened, huh? I'm sure this is normal. You see nothing and then bam, right? Look at these charts. Look at this. 42 feet is unreal. Something's afoot, right? Everybody's talking about this. This is what's trending. Nobody believes that this just happened spontaneously, right? Think of the anomalies. You have Lahaina, you have L.A., you've got Asheville, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, where the Category 3 hit the coast and then turned to a Category 5. Everybody's questioning this stuff. Everybody, everywhere, and it's trending. It's about time we got some truth out of this, no?
Donald Trump has been friends with Jeffrey Epstein for years. In 2002, he told New York Magazine that he's, quote, known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life. Close quote. Jeffrey Epstein claimed he introduced Donald Trump to Melania. Epstein is known for grooming beautiful women for powerful men. On July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested. 2 weeks later, he was murdered in his jail cell, all during President Trump's first term. Shortly after Trump began his second term, political agents and useful idiots posed for the cameras with DOJ binders, as if justice was coming, and nothing followed. Until this week, when we were told that the DOJ and the FBI concluded that Epstein had no client list and died by suicide. While this isn't fooling the awakening masses, political agents and useful idiots began doing their best to defend Trump and steer everyone towards immigration, where the solution will obviously be the digital ID for every U.S. citizen. The overwhelming majority of U.S. government representatives are the recipients of hundreds of millions of dollars paid out by AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were clearly part of a sexual blackmail operation run by the Mossad and the CIA to further own the American government. This is why our government officials are all on board with the genocide being committed by the U.S. and Israel.
Do you think that there can be a two-state solution that creates an independent?
I don't know. I'd ask Bibi that question. You have the greatest man in the world to answer that age-old question, two-state. Go ahead. You give him your honest answer.
I think Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves, but none of the powers should threaten us. And that means that certain powers, like overall security, will always remain in our hands. Now, that is a fact. And no one in Israel will agree to anything else because we don't commit suicide. We want life, we cherish life for ourselves, for our neighbors. And I think we can work out a peace between us and the entire Middle East with President Trump's leadership. And by working together, I think we can establish a very, very broad peace that will include all our neighbors.
When Pam Bondi was asked about all this, Trump couldn't help but interrupt her and show frustration that anyone was concerned about his old friend of 15 years.
One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the staff?
Yeah, sure. If I
Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
And Pam Bondi suggested that the child porn they have in evidence was Epstein's personal collection that he downloaded from the internet and nothing at all to do with blackmail.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that.
Greg Reese reporting.
Because this lie goes way back. And like I said, a lot of things were going on in 1666, gravity being one of them, pushing the sun further and further away. But as you look at their timeline, people involved with the lie, a certain organization, the Jesuits, which happened to form a merger with the Masons to create the Illuminati in 1776, they had a hand involved with a lot of these distances getting further and further away. And so what happens when you start investigating that aspect? Well, I found this out too the other day, that according to a Jesuit historian named Joseph F. McDonnell, in his book, Companions of Jesuits, A Tradition of Collaboration, where he writes that it is a challenge for historians to find a single significant scientist of the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries who was not in some way involved with the Jesuits and their colleagues, as students, as teachers, as relatives, as collaborators, as adversaries, as rivals, or simply as personal friends. So this is from a historian, and he says it's a challenge to find a single scientist, a significant scientist. So one of the ones that you would probably know their name. If you know their name, it's a challenge to find one that wasn't involved with that organization. I think that is extremely telling. And the people that were doing these things, people like Christian Huygens, Isaac Newton, Tycho Brahe, Copernicus, all of them, they didn't even have the technology and resources we have now. Copernicus didn't even have a telescope. Tycho Brahe, he was pretty good genius. He was actually geocentric. He believed the world was stationary and that everything moved around us. But he had his work, after he passed away, was poisoned, taken up by Kepler, who had a magnification telescope of 20 to 30 times, and then, of course, Newton with his 30 to 35 times, and then Christian Huygens 43 times, and now we've got Nikon P1000s 125 times. And so we have a lot of technology now. People have seen far too much. And so measuring distances to the sun, creating all these theories that require gravity, need people to come up with some crafty little lies. And one of them was that, of course, they could triangulate using Venus to tell us how far away the Earth is. Of course, you'd have to know how big Venus is to even come close to getting an accurate number. This is what it looked like. We talked about this before. Check out the outer edges. Trying to get a measurement, trying to push that sun further away while inventing the lie of gravity. Well, NASA in the 1970s took this picture, sent it back to us. 1974. Problem is, everyday people started taking pictures of Venus and it looked nothing like that. Here's my photo with the Nikon P900 on the right. This very bright light. I mean, this is a bright light in the firmament. And it looks like this. And I thought, wait, I thought it was like blue and white and had clouds. Why does it look this bright from so far away? Given the inverse square law should make it look less bright than it did up close from their Mariner mission. Well, NASA came along and produced another image that looks more like what people were taking. And I thought, man, where did this come from? Looks nothing like the Mariner image. Well, they said, oh yeah, it was one that we used data from the Mariner mission to create. Why would you do that? They didn't use data to make this. They took a picture. Now you're using data to make it look more like what we see.
Look at this picture here. The sun has swung around to our region. The light is being cast over the peak of this mountain, and look at the shadow. The farther away it is, the wider it gets, because that is how it works in nature. That's what's duplicatable. That's what can be demonstrated. And this is, notice that the shadow is never smaller than the object. But explain this. This is supposedly an image from space of an eclipse over Mexico. And if you look at a map, you can see that's 50 or maybe 60 miles across. Hard to say, but it's not a quarter the size of the Earth. But could the moon cast a shadow smaller than itself? Look at this illustration. If the ball is right up against the surface, the shadow is the exact same size. And if it gets farther away, the edges might become blurry, and the shadow can actually be bigger than the object, but it can't be smaller. So how can you explain that something 250,000 miles away, a quarter the size of the Earth, casts a shadow 50 miles across right there? So when they show you this, don't you scratch your head for a minute and go, how is that possible? The shadow is the same size as the object in all scientific demonstrations. Now, when they show you one of their baloney illustrations and say, no, this is the magic. Look, the sun is so big it encompasses everything around it, and the light just kind of shoots itself up underneath the moon and makes a spot smaller than the moon. But actually, that is the exact opposite of what you really find in the real world. If the eclipse spot in this image was the light source, the shadow would be the size of the sun. It's the opposite. Look at the picture again. Light source, object, and shadow, which is bigger than the object unless the object is right up against the surface upon which it is casting the shadow. This next image is from a University of Montana, and they tried to replicate what they claim happens with this model. On the right you have the Earth, then you have the moon, then they inserted a light diffuser, and that light diffuser is between the light source and the moon. So you can see that somehow the shadow is manipulated in such a way that it looks like it's a little bit smaller in the middle, a little hazy around the edge. And this is what they tell us that eclipses do. But in the real world, where's the diffuser? There's supposedly an Earth, a moon, empty space for 93 million miles and then a light source. This is the exact same model without the diffuser. This is what really exists: the Earth and a moon and a light source. And notice that because the moon is not right up against the Earth, the shadow on the Earth there is bigger than the moon. So how does that work? That means that the path of an eclipse should be way bigger than what they're showing you in the official model. Now we know how shadows work. All you have to do is just play around with some light and an object. We know how the model of shadows work. The farther away the shadow is projected away from the object, the bigger it gets. But they tell you, you take this, and somehow miraculously, you get this. I had an extra thought that I wanted to throw in on this eclipse shadow subject. It shows what is claimed to be a solar eclipse over Mexico City in Mexico there, and you can see that that shadow is, I don't know, 50 or 100 miles across, and the Earth is the moon is 2,000 miles wide. Whether that photo is fake or not, look at the path that the total eclipse makes across the United States. It is that size. Wouldn't this image imply that if that moon wasn't in the way and you were on the Earth, the sun would look huge, bigger than the moon? The sun never looks bigger than the moon. This image is very misleading because it would suggest that if you just deleted the moon out of that picture, the sun would look bigger than the moon does. Obvious. We have lines that go from the sun across the moon to the Earth. Small shadow. The problem with this is they show it on both models, incidentally. They show it on the solar and the lunar eclipses. But wouldn't this imply that the light is not parallel? If it's converging like that, that means it would eventually intersect. So let's get this straight. When science wants you to believe one thing, they'll show you intersecting light rays. But when they want you to believe something else they teach, they're only going to show you straight rays, like in this one. In the experiment that Eratosthenes did, the light had to be straight for it to work. If it wasn't straight, sundials wouldn't work. But they do, because light travels, it's radiation, it travels in a straight line. But they say, no, it actually converges and it would intersect. But every other scientific explanation about light behavior and discoveries show straight light rays. This is an excellent illustration here. Look at the light. Do they imply any convergence? Any light that would eventually intersect? Absolutely not. But they will show you anything that it takes to help you believe what they want you to believe.
The sun is not 93 million miles away. Why do people think the sun is 93 million miles away? Because of trigonometry, my dear Watson. From two different places on Earth, we take measurements of the angles at which we see Venus when it crosses in front of the sun. We then take the distance between the two places on Earth and the angles we measured to form a triangle between the Earth and Venus. And then, on those lines, we form another triangle between Venus and the Sun. Now, using our trigonometrical skills, we can determine the distance to the Sun. The math is perfect. You can't argue with that. So how are they wrong? Well, the math is only as accurate as the measurements that were taken. The question is whether or not sunlight travels through a medium of constant density from its origin to its point of observation. You see, when light travels through matter that varies in density, it bends. And those trigonometrical triangles only work when light travels in straight lines, or when we know exactly how much it bends. Yeah, well, light travels through space. What medium does it travel through in space? Excellent question there, Sherlock. According to the World Space Agencies, the sun is constantly spewing out this stuff that they call solar wind in all directions and varying magnitudes and densities. This solar wind mostly consists of plasma and energetic particles of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, neon, and magnesium, all of which substances are known to have the capability to refract light when it passes through them.
Well, yeah, but solar wind is really thin. It can't refract light when it's so thin.
Well, let's think about that for a second. According to the World Space Agencies, the whole reason comets have tails is because of the amount of friction created when these comets travel through this solar wind. So, are you telling me that solar wind is thick enough to give a comet a tail, but thin enough not to be able to refract light?
Well, I never thought about that before. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. Though most astronomers thoroughly believe in solar wind, you won't read anywhere that they take any account for it when it comes to calculating the distance to the Sun, or to Venus, or many other places out in space as we know it. In summary, the statement that the Sun is on average about 93 million miles away is founded upon calculations, which are founded upon the idea that sunlight travels in straight lines through space. You take out the foundation, the rest will fall. Now, one last thing that I would like you to keep in mind is even if solar wind were incredibly thin, the more distance you look through something incredibly thin, the thicker it will appear. And that can and does affect the way we perceive the light that travels through it. That would most definitely be the case over a distance of 93 million miles.
Critically thinking people know how to decipher lies are by examining the details of the story. Truth is always congruent. Lies are contradictory when it comes to the details of the story. So let's go through the details of our real science, as noted here from the Astronomy Department at Ohio State. For example, if you look at how they claim the light happens to create the solar eclipse, but what I want to focus your attention on right now is how they claim with the lunar eclipses up here in this diagram, again depicting the straight sunlight coming in, but then when it hits the earth, we've got bendy light, or creating the umbra penumbra abracadabra shadow, I call it, that you can't reproduce here on earth. You don't ever see a shadow like this, a dark area with a light area. Please show me, curveballers. I want to see it. Anyhow, see, these details that are contradictory prove it's not true and it's a lie. But only when you examine the details will you find these lies. See here, parallel light rays when they tell you they discovered 2,000 years ago that it was a ball Earth. And he knew it was 7 degrees off at this well over here versus the well in Syene. And from that, we could calculate the diameter of the ball Earth at 40,000 kilometers. But then what happens when they need to explain away the moon disappearing and then turning red? They come up with bendy light rays that create a umbra penumbra abracadabra shadow. See that? Aha, see? Look at this. Opposite side of the earth, crisscross their lines. But hey, what happened to parallel sun rays over here? When they need the light rays to be straight, they're straight. When they need them bent, they're bent. And apologetics for the ball earth will say, well, it's still within a half a degree, so essentially it's straight. If you draw this up in AutoCAD, folks, draw a line from the tangent point over here at the radius of the sun, offset at 200,000 miles. Draw a horizontal line straight out, and then the bent line over here to the Earth, on the opposite limb of the Earth at its tangent point. Then measure from that offset line 200,000 miles away. The lines that people are claiming are straight are off by almost 1,000 miles. They're off by 430,000 miles from a horizontal line drawn this way to that line. It's ridiculous, people, but that's why they never show this at scale. They never put it in its entirety. They give it to you in piecemeal, because when you put it all together, the story doesn't coalesce. You can see the incoherent statements and the lies that belie this model and prove it to be false. And then they invoke different things like the sigil of Satan, the story they're telling. What are the odds, folks? Just coincidence? Come on.